All right, thanks a lot for watching the show. I'm here with Desi Cooney. We're here to, talk some powerlifting, competing, and anything else that might come up. And I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about your background and eventually how you did get into powerlifting?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Clint.
Anytime.
So I'm originally from the Chicago area, and I came to Nebraska in 2013 for school. So I went to UNL on just because of a academic scholarship, basically, and then graduated undergrad in 2017 and stayed on as a graduate assistant for my master's, which I wrapped up in May of 2019, so a little over a year ago. Both of those degrees were in nutrition and exercise science, so that's kind of my thing. And during that time, or the last 4 years of it or so, I was working as an intern with the strength and conditioning department, coaching athletes and just working with their strength staff and programming for different sports. So that's where I sort of cut my teeth in the realm of strength and conditioning. Worked a couple of other places, and recently, with the turn of the new year 2020, went into business for myself with Outlier Strength and Conditioning, which is my platform for online coaching, in-person coaching, and just content creation, all that good stuff.
Great.
I guess I didn't answer the second part of your question, though. So I guess I started competing in powerlifting in 2000, I can't even remember now, probably about 2017. Yeah, it was. My first meet was January 2017 with the Nebraska Barbell Club. So just basically an intramural team at the university where I just got to meet like-minded people, and it started really small and disorganized, and it's grown to the point now where we have just so many members that are interested in a lot of different things besides powerlifting, but still a big core of powerlifting. It's funny because it's sort of come full circle because I started, I joined when it was really small and like its first or second year of existence, and now I'm the head coach of it, and we've taken teams to national competitions and stuff like that. So it's just been cool to watch it grow.
That is cool. One thing that I would want to touch on, and not anything like bad against Nebraska, definitely not. But do you think that the stuff that you were learning in your undergrad and then in your master's, as far as nutrition and training and stuff like that, do you think that it was like up to date? Like, did you know more than what you think that you were being taught at the time, finding it from other avenues?
Certainly some things, yes. Just the way the curriculum is set up at Nebraska is a little bit heavier on the nutrition side of things. Mm-hmm. And while that is, pivotal and I find it interesting, I'm much more fascinated with the exercise side of things, and not strictly even like the exercise physiology, like the cellular level stuff, which is important to have a good understanding of, but I'm much more interested in the biomechanics, the exercise prescriptions, the strength and conditioning, the coaching aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is obviously not going to be touched on in the classroom much, if at all. So definitely supplemented that with, hands-on stuff in the weight room, working with athletes, and just picking up extra experience basically wherever I could. But learned a lot. I don't want to downplay, right, the fact that I did enjoy my time there, and I took a lot from it, but definitely needed a lot of supplemental learning to get where I am now, I would say.
Well, it's hard to be on the cutting edge of everything. People flip-flop, carbs are bad. Oh, carbs are awesome.
Yeah.
No, you need to do carnivore, stuff like that. So I don't know.
Nutrition and exercise are both very trendy, I think. Mm-hmm. Maybe not so much in the research side of things, but definitely in pop culture, sort of. You're right, that people go through trends like carbs are evil. We were wrong. Fat is evil. We were wrong. Carbs are actually evil. No, they're not. They're fine. Everything's fine. Flexible dieting. Never mind. Clean eating. That's all there is to it. And you're right. It comes in waves. I mean, you see it sort of repeat itself almost. But
all the time.
I don't know. People don't like to zoom out and kind of look at the big picture, I guess.
Do you think that you need to figure out what works for you?
Definitely. I think having a basic understanding of, the literature is important. But again, those studies only work with averages and like population averages, and you are an individual and you might fall anywhere on that spectrum of where that average of that study was. So the biggest part of dieting is adherence, and a big part of that is preference. So even if some magical study came out and proved that, the paleo diet was the best diet from which is not true, by the way, but if it were to just prove that 100%, that wouldn't make a difference if you couldn't stick to it. So
right,
finding what you can do day in and day out and enjoy it, which is a huge part of it that people don't talk about. Like something that you enjoy doing is going to be way better for you than what works better according to some research paper.
Cool. And I know you touched on it, but what all do you do with outlier strength and conditioning? Do you work with, athletes of all kinds, or?
Yeah, good question. So again, I personally come from a powerlifting background, and that is probably the core of my business. A lot of the people that come to me are powerlifters or are interested in getting into powerlifting. So definitely, I guess, kind of known for that. I'd say that's definitely fair to say. But as I've said, I've got experience working with a lot of different kinds of sports. I programmed and worked with a wrestling team, D1, men's, women's basketball, tennis, football, even, like all these different kinds of sports. So and that stuff is almost a little bit more interesting to me. Not that I don't love powerlifting, and not that powerlifting is easy to program for by any means. It's simple in the same way that like track is simple. You have a few metrics that you're trying to push up, and it's not necessarily easy to get there, but you don't have your finger in as many qualities that you're trying to adapt to, say, football players. So majority, I would say, probably powerlifters, but I've also worked with, through outlier, wrestling, boxing, football, different kinds of athletes like that, general population people too. I mean, people that just want to get in shape. And most of what I do is pretty much exclusively online, which is sort of how I had intended it to be, just purely online. But when we moved into this place, we decided we were going to start training people out here in person. So here and there, I do still take in-person clients, and I do still like doing that. Yeah. It's just a lot more freedom when you're just online, less reliance on other people's scheduling, that kind of thing.
So you do the strength and conditioning for boxing and wrestling, or like nutrition, or?
I don't really get involved in the nutrition side of things too much, outside of some general recommendations for Gen Pop people. I mean, I'll advise as to my knowledge. I'll say I do have my master's degree in nutrition and exercise science. However, I'm not a registered dietitian, which in the state of Nebraska you have to be able to prescribe meal plans and stuff like that. So I don't really want to step outside my scope of practice too much, but I will definitely make general recommendations as far as, what is probably the best things to be eating.
Right.
And I won't say this is what you need to be eating here, and here. So just kind of defining my boundaries is important to me. So
yeah, no, definitely, that's true. You don't. That's why, even I've been asked, I also I have done powerlifting in high school, and I did like that a lot. And then, but my favorite probably is, I don't know, you're not supposed to, and I don't exactly, but I kind of think of like powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongmen in this group. I know it's not the same, but I do. But people ask me like, hey, can you set my macros? Can you do this and that? Like, if I can, tell you that you should, I don't know, maybe diet for 5 days was normal for you, take that average, and then go up or down with your macros. But
exactly,
I'm not a registered dietitian, so
same. And I think that's sort of what we think of as step one, and that's still where a lot of people go wrong, because they'll pull a number offline, some calculator somewhere, and they won't give any thought to what's normal for them or what they have been doing, and they'll end up with like this happened to me literally a couple days ago. A friend of mine reached out and was like, I usually eat around 1,800 calories, but I'm going to start eating, I think he said like 3,000 or something like that. He was like, I want to, start putting on muscle. And I was like, where did you get that number from?
Right.
Like, that's great. Like you know that you're supposed to be eating more to gain muscle, but like you didn't get that number like based on anything about you except maybe a calculator that said if you really want to gain weight, eat 1,000 more calories than you're eating right now.
Yeah, you will gain weight. Like, but perhaps not the best kind of weight that you would want.
Probably not.
Like that. Yeah. And then so all right, so like when, if ever, would you have an average weightlifter test their max? And then when would you have a active powerlifter test their max?
The more and more I sort of get into this, the less I actually concern myself with testing a true maximum. So that answer was sort of two-pronged, so I'll answer it sort of two-pronged. For a general client who's not interested in competition or whatever, you don't ever really have to. And in fact, I find it more useful to get an estimate, but a good estimate. You know what I mean?
Like a 5 rep or something.
Sure,
like that.
There's pretty good, reliable calculations you can run to say like, this is his 5 rep max. Okay, I know what his theoretical 1 rep max is, and even if it's not his 1 rep max, it's close, and you can use that to base your percentages off of going forward.
Right.
And it's the knowledge of differentiating between training and displaying what you've been training for, or like training and testing.
Yeah.
And if you are dogmatic and say like, I'm going to test every 6 weeks, or I'm going to test every 4 weeks or something like that, you're taking valuable time to me away from training, basically to show off. Not that it's not important to let your client see progress. So yeah, you don't ever have to max out, but once in a while it might be valuable for them. You know what I mean?
Right.
To see the progress that they've made. But a lot of times I think they're happy also with knowing that their estimated max is going up, as long as we're talking about weight on the bar going up, and they can see that. So having a good estimate I find to be more important, especially if you're working back off of a percentage-based system. And for a power lifter, who's someone who might use a reps in reserve or an RPE type of scale for a lot of their training, which is at least what I do. I sort of combine percentages and ratings of perceived exertion. I can have a client hit a set, we'll call it a single, but an RPE of 8. So basically, if for the unfamiliar, if I hit a single, I hit 1 rep at RPE 8, I know that I could probably have done it for 3 reps. So now, he might have only lifted 500 for 1, but in my head, I know that he could have hit it for 3. Now I can enter 500 for 3 into a calculation and base his max off of that. And the cool thing about using an RPE scale or a reps in reserve or whatever kind of metric you're using is that day to day, that max is going to change depending on how fatigued you are, how much sleep you got, how your training is going, a variety of different factors. It's not always going to be that max that you're basing it off of that you got at the beginning of the program. You know what I mean?
Right.
So having a more fluid approach to it, I think, is a valuable tool for sort of tracking how your strength is progressing, if that answers your question. But as far as hitting an all-out max for a powerlifter at competition, maybe once or twice a year outside of that, but I'm not interested really in spending my time testing. I'd rather be training.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, it's crazy with the metrics too, because you got to figure out what you're good at. I know that whenever I was really testing my maxes and all that in college, I'm a 1 rep squatter. I can hit my max on a 1 rep squatter, but my projected max is going to be bigger if I do 5 reps on bench. Yep. It's not the same. But
people are different in that way. You have people that are really good at the lower reps, and people are really good at the higher reps. Maybe some of that has to do with muscle fiber typing, more fast twitch people, more slow twitch people. You would expect to see differences there. And another thing that gets overlooked a lot is that there are technical changes and there are recruitment changes between the way you lift a lightweight and the way you lift a heavyweight. And that's been proven in research. Like, the way you squat 225 is going to be different in technique and muscle fiber recruitment from the way you squat 495, depending on what your max is. So that projected max from a set of 8 might not be as accurate as a set of 2 or 3, So
yes,
just another thing to kind of keep in mind going forward.
Yeah, like the set of 8, you could be anywhere. Yeah, no, I get that. Let's see. Oh, do you have any all-time max out jams that like you're just like that? I don't know, to get you in the mood.
Honestly, I'm cool with pretty much everything, every kind of music, except for country music when I'm lifting. I think that's pretty stupid, but other than that,
Agreed.
I can get behind just about anything. And lately, even though I started listening to this kind of music for like studying or like working, came to quickly find that it was actually really good workout music too, and that would be like movie soundtracks.
Really?
Yeah, like a lot of movie soundtracks are great because they don't have words, so it's easier to concentrate on working and stuff. But like if you get a good, I don't know, action movie soundtrack or something, like I'll give you an example, like something from the Avengers.
Right.
That theme song hits, you're pulling a PR. You know what I mean? Like, so that's. I don't listen to a lot of music when I train right now, honestly, but going into a meet or like a heavy day or something, if I had to pick a song, it would probably be something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I thought you were gonna say electronic music, but I don't know. I like everything as well. Like I don't know. I could be listening to like A$AP Ferg or anything really.
No, dude, honestly,
rock or anything.
I haven't been like wearing my headphones to lift in months. I don't know why.
If you have the motivation already, and
I think I just lift with a good group,
Yeah. A group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's the best right there. You can't beat that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear that. Let's see. Okay, so what is your number one favorite, or what you think is the most effective thing to do to recover?
Well, anything. I'm a believer that anything you do for yourself, is probably going to work better than a more passive approach. You know what I mean? Having something done to you. So while, I don't know, something like a cold bath or, someone giving you a massage or something does work. Some of those techniques work. Cold bath sort of been disproven.
Ice bath?
Yeah.
Disproven?
Yeah. I'll get into that in a second.
Oh,
but
cool. Yeah.
What I'm saying is like the one that people don't want to do and that gets overlooked, but I think is certainly the most effective is moving.
Active recovery.
Exactly. Sort of biting the dog back, whatever. It doesn't have to be exactly what made you sore, but some light form of activity to get blood flowing through those muscles that are sore or worked is going to bring nutrients to the tissues that need them most. It's going to, it's going to make you feel way better than just sitting on the couch is going to do. So you have to be kind of careful with what you're doing and, just be smart about it. But for example, like, you have really, really sore legs or something from squatting, go on a walk. Try some bodyweight lunges after you get some blood flowing. Maybe try some bodyweight squats, high reps, far from failure, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Get the blood flowing, get those muscles full of blood. You will feel so much better while you're doing it, and then afterwards as well. I encourage anyone who's like struggled with really, really bad muscle soreness, give that a try. Even if it sucks, it helps so much. But yeah, about the ice bath thing. It depends what your intent is. But basically what the ice bath does is it brings down inflammation, right? So I would say, based on everything I've seen, you only want to use that when your need to recover in the short term is greater than your need to adapt in the long term.
Okay.
So, for example, you're a basketball player like in season or something, they're all taking ice baths. I mean, a lot of them were, at least the ones I worked with.
Yeah.
Because they got multiple games a week. and they have to be ready. They have to get rid of that soreness. They have to get rid of that inflammation. They have to be ready and feeling good on game day. If that works for you, go for it. I'm not going to tell you no, especially if you believe in it. But if you're in the middle of the off season, you're not practicing that much, and you're lifting weights and you're trying to get bigger, the adaptation is normal. Or sorry, that swelling and everything that you're trying to reduce with that ice bath is normal. That's part of the adaptation process. That inflammation response. Yeah. If you shut that down, you're sort of negating a lot of the progress that you could be making. So, because you're trying to, adapt to that training stimulus. So don't negate that response. You need that. Unless your performance tomorrow is going to be more important than your performance in 2 months, skip the ice bath for sure.
Okay. It's like after football practice or whatever, you have practice tomorrow, find an ice bath.
Fair point. Yeah. Like if you have to be ready to go tomorrow morning, go for it.
That makes sense.
If you just need to get in the gym and like you have an off day tomorrow, like don't do it. And another thing is, it gets overused a lot. So it's a stimulus just like anything else, and you adapt to any stimulus that you give yourself. So if you're giving yourself 3 ice baths a week in the middle of the off season, and then once season hits, you think that it's going to keep working for you, maybe, but it's not going to work as well as if you just hadn't done that and you reintroduced it when the stress got high. You know what I mean? So it's more novel for you.
That makes total sense. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so one thing that people say is like, does it take weight to move weight? Like you see people with the giant power bellies, or but then again you see like half Thor von Bjornsson or whatever who's jacked, and then you see Eddie Hall, who also jacked, but like a rounder.
Sure. I think it depends a lot on the context. Yeah. So in your world, in the combat sport world, even in a contact sport world, there's definitely some truth to that, as you could probably attest to. Like if you're grappling, that's the reason weight classes exist partly in the first place. Is like if you're a 130 pound guy having to overcome a 230 pound guy, you're at a severe disadvantage, even if he's a really big fat guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you still have to overcome his weight, and he's trying to like keep you down. Now in my world, in the powerlifting context, that's still a pretty common saying, but I think it's a little bit of a misnomer, because that fat, that adipose tissue that you're carrying around is non-contractile tissue, so it really can't help you lift weight. It can't help you produce more force, which is the goal of powerlifting, right? Is to overcome these big weights. It's non-contractile tissue. It does not help your total. Some people might say that it gives you a leverage advantage against the weight. Maybe. If you look at the way a really, really big, like a Ray Williams or like a Eddie Hall or whoever, they got a big belly, these heavyweights. It's weird because when they squat, the top half or the top quarter of their squat is the hardest part, which is exactly the opposite of pretty much everyone else in every other weight class. And that's because at the bottom, their belly is banging into their thighs, and they get like this rebound effect off of it. In that one case, okay, like I get it. Other than that, the thing that's going to make the difference between a bigger total and a lower total is lean body mass. So the amount of actual contractile tissue and muscle that you have. So it's common to hear someone be like, I bulked up, I gained 20 pounds, whatever, my total went up. It takes weight to move weight. It's like, you put on lean body mass and you put on fat. It's the lean body mass that's making the change here. You know what I mean? Like that's what's responsible. The fat isn't helping you move that deadlift. You know what I mean? But it's also anecdotally true that when people diet down, their total might go down a little bit. You know what I mean? I think that's more to do with being in a calorie deficit and trying to train. So we know that while dieting, it's common to lose lean body mass a little bit. Hopefully not as much as fat mass, but it really depends on how you do your diet. If you lose lean body mass, I would expect your total to go down. That's not anything crazy, I don't think, any stretch of the imagination. So if you could preserve your lean body mass and reduce your fat mass, I would not expect your total to change. I would expect maybe your training to suffer while you're in that calorie deficit state, because obviously calories help you recover from training. So I think it's the diet that makes the difference, or vice versa. When you're in a calorie surplus, like you're probably recovering better from training.
Yeah.
So that's probably part of it. I would say at the end of the day, it has a lot more to do with your lean body mass and your diet, and less to do with your actual body weight. But that's just my opinion, I suppose.
Okay. Did you see anything about the Eddie Hall in the mountain boxing match that's coming up this spring? Do you have any predictions or
predictions? I'll give it to Hathor, just because of the reach. He seems a little bit lighter on his feet for a big man.
Yeah.
But honestly, neither of them look really good at like
hitting mitts or anything like that.
Any of the boxing footage they put out, doesn't look super impressive. Not that I have like a great eye for boxing, but I've done a little bit. Like I have a little bit of an eye for boxing, and like, I mean, they're losing weight, they're getting shredded, but they're still probably both over 400 pounds. So it's like, how fast could you possibly move at that weight, you know? But it's going to be hype, you know, it's going to be cool. I don't think it's going to be like as good of a fight as people think it is, because, I mean, you'll attest to this, I'm sure too, but like, even like heavyweight boxers who weigh half as much as them, like gas out quicker than little guys, you know? And we're talking about 2 400-pound men.
Right.
Like, how much movement do you think you're going to get out of them, you know?
Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah. I mean, like Deontay Wilder, he weighed like 218 whenever he fought Tyson Fury his first time, and he's like 6'9", you know, compared to them weighing 400 pounds. Like, I don't know, I'm obligated to go with Eddie Hall being like the shorter, rounder guy myself. So I can't stray away from that, but I am excited for their fight.
Definitely. I'm still going to watch it.
Oh, for 100%.
Sure.
And I would be upset if it turns out to be like an exhibition thing, kind of like how they're talking about the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr.
Yeah.
Like they're saying like no knockdowns, no knockouts.
It will get stopped if it stops being an exhibition.
Yeah.
Which I
understand for like the older
they're in their
guys.
50s, like, I get it. But
I guess I understand that for anybody, but then like, I don't know, do you want to really like pay a pay-per-view to see people spar? I don't know. Probably will.
I guess they're both kind of two legends, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's cool. I never thought I'd see another like Mike Tyson step back in the ring. So like, I'm a huge Mike Tyson fan.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm probably gonna pay for it and watch it again. But
for sure,
you know, managing expectations. I mean, I get it, but we'll see.
We'll see. That's funny. Let's see here. Okay. So what do you think about powerlifters doing auxiliary movements or even isolation exercises?
I guess you could say I'm a big fan. I think it depends a lot on where you're at in your lifting career, kind of. So when you're first getting started, probably just squat, bench, and deadlift are all you need. You know, to continue making progress. You can expect to just do those things and keep progressing. And I'm actually writing what could either be an article or a video about this right now. So this is sort of relevant. But the reason we do these, you know, accessory, auxiliary, secondary, whatever you want to call them, exercises is to sort of, in part, to bring up weak points. And for a beginner, it's like you don't have any weak points because you don't have any strong points yet. So just learn how to squat, you know?
Yeah.
Get a decent squat and a bench and a deadlift, and then you can start to worry about the other stuff. But as far as, you know, incorporating them, there's a lot of different reasons to, I think. So we already addressed addressing your specific weak points. So if you have, for example, like a really bad hip shift in your squat, or you have really weak quads, just low bar squatting isn't going to fix either of those problems. You know what I mean? You have to do something that's going to correct that hip shift. You have to do something that's going to grow those quads more than they get hit in your low bar squat. So yeah, for some of those reasons, absolutely. And another big reason that I include some of the smaller exercises is just for health and longevity. So I train, like, pretty much any one of my programs is going to include, you know, a rotator cuff exercise, an adductor exercise, like a Copenhagen side plank, stuff that you don't really see a whole lot of, but like if you just did it, you know, once a week, you might not ever run into some of these super common issues that everybody has with like, oh, I blew out my shoulder, oh, I pulled my groin or something. It's like, well, maybe if you had done these, you would have been fine.
Right.
And so far it's worked. So, yeah, I think there's lots of reasons to use them depending on what they are, including weak points, hypertrophy, bringing up lagging muscle groups, longevity, joint health, and the other one is just variety. So
yeah,
a novel stimulus, like people like to kind of downplay how important that is. But if a stimulus is novel for you, you'll see some adaptation to it. So like if you've been low bar squatting for a year straight and you just took like a month off and switched to, you know, a front squat or a safety bar squat or something like that, not only would all those little overuse injuries and nagging pains kind of probably alleviate themselves in a lot of cases, but you could expect to see some progress then when you go back to low bar squat if you handle your training properly. Now that being said, there's other schools of thought. And if you go into the East and you look at Russian lifters and stuff like that, I don't think Andrei Milanichev or Yuri Belkin or those guys,
they squat every day, or a lot of them, right?
well, it's not that they squat every day, it's that they don't do much other than squat, bench, deadlift.
Right.
Like someone famously asked like Yuri Belkin, they were like, what kind of accessory lifts do you do for squat or something? And he has his little like translator app and he's like, more sets. You know, like
more sets.
Yeah, so he's like, I literally do these three things.
High rep, lower rep.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm just the best at them, you know. So that's just my personal philosophy. Other people have success doing things differently, but yeah, I see the value in it for sure.
So you're talking about people starting out lifting, like if they do load up a good bit of weight on the squat bar and they go down, then they come up with a little bit of butt wink. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Do you think that they should try and fix that, or like, because some people, you know, some powerlifters are good, you know, with with having it. Is that bad? It's, I mean, again, in my opinion, largely case dependent. So it's really tough to give a definitive answer on this. Okay.
It's okay. If it passes the eye test, you know, like if it's very slight, and that's another thing, it might not be, you know, your lower back getting compromised. It might literally just be your pelvis posteriorly tilting a little bit to get into a neutral position. The reason most people butt wink is because they're really, really hinging their squat, or they're really pushing their hips back, or they're really anteriorly pelvic tilted, or their lower back is really, really extended. And you can't expect to hit depth that way for 99% of people. So that's your body sort of correcting itself, getting your hips back under you, so that you can get that last degree of hip flexion, basically. So the squat is basically, you know, hip flexion. If you start by anteriorly tilting your pelvis, you've removed some possible degrees of hip flexion that you could possibly get. You've gone into hip extension, basically, and you're going to run out of room. So if it's just a little bit of a wink, you know, maybe not the end of the world, especially if their lower back isn't compromised. I definitely like to get people into a less extended position at the top, a little bit less of a hingy squat, again, case by case basis. Yeah. But then that problem seems to go away. The reason people don't really butt wink as much in like a goblet squat or a front squat compared to like a low bar squat is because one, they're more upright, and two, their pelvis is in more of a neutral position by way of where the center of mass is. So when it's further out in front of you, your knees are naturally going to go more forward, your pelvis is going to be in a neutral or slightly posteriorly tilted position, whereas if the weight is behind you, like in a low bar or back squat, it's super common to adopt that sort of extended pattern through the back, through the pelvis, and then it's going to be really hard to hit depth again because you're going to have to basically change that pattern at the bottom. So I worry about it sometimes if it's bad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's obviously bad.
It's more a question of what's going on at the top position of their squat, I think, than strictly what's at the bottom. And the secret to fixing it usually just lies in fixing the orientation of their pelvis.
Yeah, that makes sense. As long as it's not too bad. Okay, would you recommend like football players, basketball players, doing straight bar bench, and then also what would you recommend martial artists do straight bar bench?
Can they? Yes. Successfully? Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it done plenty of times. We all have. Can it really mess you up if you do it wrong? Like, yeah, of course it can. So it depends, but the difference between, training someone for a sport like that, for strength, like a strength generalist versus a strength specialist, like a powerlifter, is that these people don't have to bench press. These people do. So
yeah,
just getting away from, I think a lot of coaches get into strength and conditioning because they like lifting, they like bench pressing. So it's like, well, I know bench pressing, I'm good at it, so I'm going to give it to all these people. You know what I mean?
Right.
Getting away from that mentality and finding some substitutions for it that might work better for certain people or certain groups or certain situations is essential. Yeah. But could one of those variations for building upper body strength and horizontal pressing power be a normal bench press? Yeah, 99% of the time, I think that's not an issue at all.
Yeah, well, all right, so like at jiu-jitsu the other night, like I was talking to a strength coach that I'm pretty sure we both know, and he was telling me that he's hurt from bench. I'm like, but you're the coach.
Yeah.
I'm like, hold on a second. Like, if you get hurt, then I just feel like a lot of people can get hurt, and I do bench, by the way, all the time. So I'm not against it. I'm just wondering if you thought that the risk is worth the
reward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to sort of weigh that decision based on, stuff that's going on. So like, again, maybe that coach is more of a strength specialist, you know what I mean? Like, because powerlifters will bench even if they're hurt because they have to, you know, like they have to do that. Whereas your athlete, like if you're working with a baseball pitcher or something in season, no, it's not your best, it's not your best option to keep their scapula fixed while their glenohumeral joint is moving, because that's not how it's going to work in their sport. And now that risk reward ratio is tipped in the favor of risk because you've got all these high velocity reps going on outside of the weight room. So yeah, find a substitution for him,
like dumbbells, kettlebells,
push-ups, weighted push-ups. I love weighted push-ups. Anything else that sort of moves that scapula and that shoulder joint in a unit as they're sort of intended to move in sport, generally a little bit of a safer option in those sort of high risk scenarios. But if it's a football player, a lineman in the heart of the off season, you can probably derive more adaptation from a bench press than you can from like a single arm cable overhead press.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a time and a place and there's a situation for it where it's warranted, and there's plenty of times when it's not. And a lot of it, at the end of the day, it comes down to preference. Like, as a coach, like, what do you want to do, and what are they comfortable doing? So
yeah,
I wish it were simpler than that, but I don't think it is.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And like, I don't know, you definitely need to be smart and not super maxing and doing all that kind of stuff. So
I guess for a fighter, like a boxer, to me, categorically, is almost an overhead athlete, just because of throwing a punch is not super dissimilar from throwing a ball in a lot of ways. So, in the middle of his camp or something, getting ready for a fight, if he's a boxer, maybe not a wrestler, but like a boxer, for example, who's really getting every range of motion out of that shoulder joint, every inch of function out of it, to restrict that movement in a bench press, again, it might not be your best option. That's one combat sport athlete. But for a wrestler, like, maybe it doesn't matter that much. You know what I mean? Just depends.
That makes sense. Then I was wondering if you have any general thoughts on Olympic weightlifting and CrossFit.
I do have my USAW from like 4 years ago, so like I can coach weightlifting and stuff like that. It is not a hobby of mine. I don't dabble in it too frequently, although I did do a power clean once. And I think it's sort of the same vein as powerlifting in that it creeps into strength and conditioning because the coach likes it. Yeah. And maybe not because it's the best choice for the athlete. I've seen it done really, really successfully with teams, and I've seen it done horribly with teams. And I think it again, it's context dependent. But as far as, a sport in itself, I mean, weightlifting's cool, man. That's in the Olympics. Powerlifting can't say that, at least not yet, and maybe ever. But that's really cool. It takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of training. When it crosses into sport, that's where I see some of the problems arising from it. And then CrossFit is kind of the same deal for me. CrossFit got barbells in the hands of more people than powerlifting and weightlifting combined. So net good, I would say. They did a great job of getting a lot of people in shape, making strength cool. When CrossFit starts to creep into sport and other sports, if you consider CrossFit a sport, when it creeps into strength and conditioning for other sports, that's a problem. And when it creeps into Olympic weightlifting, that's a problem, because the training for an Olympic weightlifter and a CrossFitter who does Olympic weightlifting is going to be very, very different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This guy is doing 1 to 2 reps, decently heavy weight, high focus on technique, a lot of rest in between. This guy, his task is to hit, I don't even know, 15 sets of 5 every minute on the minute snatch with X percent. His form itself is going to be in the same movement, not the same as this guy, because he's trying to move as much weight as he can, and he's trying to get this over with as quickly as he can. You know what I mean? And people forget that. They think it's the same thing, but really it's not. So, I mean, if either of those things are your thing, that's cool.
Go for it, yeah.
When they start to bleed into each other and when they start to bleed into strength and conditioning, problems are going to crop up, in my experience at least.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm also a fan of both, but yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. And when do you think that we're going to be able to have powerlifting competitions? I know that I had heard that some of them have been canceled, and in my mind, I'm thinking that that's one of the more easier ones during the COVID time to maybe pull off. We've been having MMA for 2 months or whatever. Yeah. We've had 4 events, which is a bit more up and personal.
It was a bit of a scramble when everything first started shutting down, and you could see that in the national level competitions. The organizers of those definitely scrambling, what can we do here? Obviously we still want this to happen. So I'll just give you a brief bit of context. The last time I competed was in December of last year, so 2019. I had intended to compete in May of this year at the state games, the state meet is what it's called, which got canceled completely due to COVID. And that was, I think, more due to it was at a school at Midland.
Yeah.
That whole school was shut down, and I'm pretty sure
Fremont was really bad.
Was really bad. Yeah. So again, understandable. Collegiate Nationals was supposed to have occurred in April in Philadelphia. It was originally at Penn State. Penn State got shut down, and the Pennsylvania governor had said can't have groups of more than 100 people. There's 1,000 people that need to compete at this event. Yeah. So that's something to be said for that. And you're in an enclosed space. The warm-up room, if you've ever been to one at a national meet, is 600 people are back there warming up and sharing equipment and touching all the same stuff. So I get it. That one got postponed, and at the time I thought it was canceled, but it's now happening in Philadelphia next month. So it's back on. Raw Nationals was supposed to be in October. That got canceled. Sort of the same reason, but also this one was in Florida. So Florida was obviously really bad at the time. So that one is completely canceled. They're not redoing that. But now, I guess, new rules being passed from the top. USA Powerlifting is the federation most of my people compete in. Done a pretty good job of damage control, what can we do safely? How can we mitigate risk? So now, every USA Powerlifting meet, everybody's wearing masks. I believe there's restrictions in place as to how many people can be in attendance, how many people you can have coaching you, and sort of just reducing overall crowding going on. So they're coming back now. Good. And it's been a while. It's good. So we have two coming up next month. One's going to be November 7th, and that'll be in Midland, and that's a collegiate meet called the Warrior Collegiate Open, I think. So that's November 7th. I've got about 7 or 8 people competing at that one, so that should be fun. And then 2 weeks later is Collegiate Nationals in Philadelphia, and we have 6 or 7 people going to that one too. And I've just been telling them, like, start practicing now, because I can guarantee you're going to be wearing a mask on the platform, and some people aren't used to that. It might throw them off. I wear a mask when I'm training, and it's fine. Like, after the first 2 times, you don't really care anymore. It doesn't really bother you or anything. So I do think it can be done safely, and it is being done safely in a lot of places. It just took them, a couple months of like damage control, like what can we do, what can't we get away with, like a local meet with 40 people who are all wearing masks, a national meet with 1,200 people, I think it's just a scalability thing.
I guess I didn't think about that, because like at our MMA fights or whatever, we have all the fighters and their coaches, and that's not 1,000 people. Yeah. And then they're away from the fans, and even if we're working on it, we're not near the fighters.
Yeah.
Or anything like that.
I do think it's less about like just, the contact aspect of it. Whereas like I'm remembering Raw Nationals last year, like again, warm up room's crazy. There's 400 people back there warming up. There's 1,000 people in the stands watching, and it's all indoors. So it's kind of a hot spot for any kind of contagion, I suppose.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then do you compete raw? Do most of your athletes compete raw?
Yeah, most of them do right now. I've had like people do knee wraps and stuff before. I don't really...
Straps?
No. So there's different categories. So, everybody right now on my team competes raw. So in a raw division, for those that don't know, you're allowed to wear a belt, knee sleeves, which are not as supportive, wrist wraps.
Not the 130 inches or for boxing.
No.
I've seen people try that even whenever I was in high school.
I think the 3 feet or so is, I don't remember exactly what the max length is, but there is a max length, and they're built differently than boxing wraps, just basically to cast the wrist. And then in another federation, you have raw with wraps, which is the same thing, but now you get knee wraps, which are up to, I don't even know how long because I don't compete in them, but a little bit more supportive, a little more casting, a little more rebound. And then you have single ply powerlifting, which was pretty big in the high school scene around here. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you get basically canvas single ply, like squat suits, deadlift suits, and like bench shirts, which are, elastic in nature, and they'll contribute to your total in a big way. You can see that, and you get knee wraps in that division as well. And then a step up from that is like multi-ply powerlifting, where the suits are insanely tough. Like this is West Side barbell guys. This is those old school powerlifters that look like they have really weird technique, is because they're taking advantage of the suit mechanics that they have. And those guys that anyone touching close to 1,000 pounds is wearing a bench shirt, basically. That's a safe way to put it. So but I don't have anybody competing equipped like that right now.
Oh yeah. And is there drug testing?
Yeah. So pretty much everybody right now is going through USA Powerlifting as the federation, and that's a completely drug tested federation, which, morals aside, is sort of the cool thing about powerlifting relative to other sports, is that you have federations that don't drug test. Yeah. So I feel like there's less pressure to cheat with steroids and stuff like that, because you can just go to the other federation and they pay more anyway. Like USA Powerlifting, there's not really any money to win in it outside of like maybe one meet. Like, you pay them to compete, and you're going to be drug tested, and you can safely assume that everyone else is pretty much clean. Yeah. And if they're not clean, they're probably not as good as you are, because they're not getting selected for drug testing. You know what I mean?
Right. You probably only get tested if you set a world record or come top two.
It's something like top 5 or 10% of every meet gets tested. Well, okay, it's not top. It's just 5% of the meet gets tested. but it's going to be the top people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then you have like the USPA or any number of other federations who openly don't test, or they have both categories, tested and untested.
Yeah.
And they have big prize money on the line at a lot of meets. So it's like, if you want to go that route, just go over there and do it. You know, you don't gain anything from doing it here except for like a trophy.
Yeah.
You know? And it's way harder anyway. Like, why not just go over here and not have to worry about random drug tests and maybe even win money for it? You know what I mean? So again, like, morals aside, that's what's cool about it compared to, like, I don't know, any other Olympic sport where like people are actively trying to cheat because it's what you do, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man. And then I was just gonna ask, like, do you have any, or you had touched on your 2 events. Do you have any announcements or things going on with Outlier Strength that you like to talk about?
Those would be the big 2.
When are those again?
So yeah, we got.
I'm interested in the Midland one.
Yeah, come on up, man, and watch.
Yeah.
That's going to be November 7th, Saturday, and it's going to be a collegiate-only meet, about 40 people competing in it, and, you know, at least 7 or 8 of them are going to be with me, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Not that far away from Lincoln. For all those listening, come check us out. And then we have the big national meet, or collegiate national meet, is the 20th through the 22nd, I think, in November, and that's up in Philly. But I'll be posting all about that. You can see how everyone's going to do. Everybody's going to do great. I'm really hoping we come home with some medals this year. So that'd be really cool. But other than that, no, just focusing on, those are my primary, you know, things right now. And in the meantime, just growing the business. We're coming up on 1 year and at the turn of the year, so that'll be just exciting, and yeah, just looking to go forward and keep growing and keep having fun with it.
Sweet. And where can people reach you?
So you can go to my website, which is www.beoutlierstrong.com, and there's, you know, free articles and training programs and stuff on there if you want to check those out. My email address is on there as well. It's just Desi Cooney, DESI, at beoutlierstrong.com, or I'm super active on Instagram and Facebook, and Instagram would be at outlierstrong. So definitely check out any one of those platforms, and I'm not that hard to get in contact with on there. So.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for having me.